All right. Want to open it up for questions. Want to hear what's going on in your guys' businesses, what things are coming up, what insights are we wanting to gain from the rest of the group after this week. Yeah, let's hear it.
I have one thing I'd like to kind of ask the group.
There we go. What's up, Riley?
Yeah. So obviously everyone's here because we're in growth scaling phases of our business, right? So I've had employees now for 9 months, and spent a lot of time like getting them trained up on stuff like Builder Trend, kind of putting in, implementing systems and processes internally that we've kind of all developed together. So we spent a lot of time, scaling and building the business and the systems we need to run the way we are now. And I feel like some of that to a degree has cooled off, in terms of we're not as busy focusing on, how to get Builder Trend working, how we're gonna, what our timeline for jobs looks like, blah, blah, blah. So I'm interested to see, like, as people have grown and kind of matured their team, and gotten through the initial push of training into the business, what ways or creative things that people have done to implement, weekly, monthly training within your staff or with your team. Number one, to help boost like team morale and, camaraderie and stuff, but also, to continue to build and develop a culture as we continue to scale and, look to, in the future soon hire more people on. Because really the 2 employees that I have now, I kind of envision being like my core 2 employees as we scale and grow things. So it's really important to me that the 3 of us together kind of establish and develop and nurture a culture that we can, continue to carry forward as we hire employees and continue to grow. So I'm just curious if anyone has any suggestions or pointers or creative ways that they've kind of implemented some training in that respect.
So Riley, what I almost hear a question being is like, hey, we've begun through a lot of these like heavy lifting stuff, like getting everyone on Builder Trend. We've kind of gained a culture of like, hey, we train. That's like a part of what we do. But the stuff we've been focused on, that's kind of smoothed out. And I'm wondering, hey, what might be the best way to continually train a team? What maybe should I train my team in next? Is that the question? Am I hearing you right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay. Guys, does anyone have any insights on this before I just go spouting off stuff?
And it's certainly not because like I feel like there's lack of skill or lack of, holes in my team's ability, but just more so like I just don't want to be a complacent leader and a complacent manager of my team.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna get some feedback. If other people have feedback, we'd love to hear it. But there's this quote by this guy named Jim Cathcart. Jim Cathcart was kind of this like Zig Ziglar type, wasn't quite on that level, but that kind of speaker. He was like a Toastmasters Golden Gavel winner, which means that he's just really good at talking on stage. And I remember in one of his talks, he was talking about training employees. And he was like, and maybe contractors can resonate with this. He was like, a lot of people ask me, like, Jim, I don't want to train and invest in my team because what ends up happening is that, like I train them, I pour into them, and then they just leave. They just go somewhere else. It's like, why would I do all this work for that? And then he responds and he's like, what about if you don't train them and they stay and they don't leave? And you don't train them and they stay instead of worrying about training them and them leaving. And I like that kind of funny story because it frames into perspective the importance of doing this, which is I know you get, right? But I'm kind of using this as an opportunity to share this. Training, like regular team training, it's one of those things that especially when you have like maybe a smaller team, we'll say like less than like 10 people, right? It's one of those things that is like uncomfortable. But if you look at any of best companies in your industry, right? what are they doing? They've got some sort of continuous training program, regardless of the industry, regardless of where they at. They're always investing in their team, always developing their team, always holding their guys to a higher standard. People are going to show up and they're not going to hold themselves to a high standard, even if they're really good craftsmen, tradesmen, whatever they are. It's going to come from the top down. It's going to only come from the top down. And you've got to expect that from your team. And so in terms of what to train or a style to train, I'll give you a kind of an example of something that I did with a company called A Better Plumber. They sold for a lot of money. Worked with them for a number of years. They sold for a lot of money back. I think it was in 2023. I think we started working with them in 2018, and it was one of those stories where they worked super hard. They were super focused, but one of the owners, Jeff Watson, he married a girl from Costa Rica. He lives at a beach house in Costa Rica now, that he custom built. He's not needing to work anymore, and he's in his early 40s, and something that they did is, for their plumbing techs, they had something called a sales university that we helped create for them, how it would work is anytime a tech was under a certain closing ratio for a week. So the first thing that they're doing is they're keeping track of their entire team's KPIs, revenue, appointments ran, appointments closed, average ticket total, closing rate, right? If anyone were below a certain closing rate, you were required to the next week, which was on a Friday afternoon, to go to the sales university. And the sales university was a repeating 4-week class that just they did, they had 4 different topics for 4 weeks repeating. And they got up to 17 trucks on the road, right? So, there was always kind of a room to teach these guys, but they just covered the same stuff again and again and again. And what they did was they created a process, hey, we broke it down to say, hey, let's first start with how the customer's greeted. Then let's start with how the diagnostic is done on the home. Then let's move to how price is presented with options, and then how the job is closed, and kind of the following service stuff. So every 4 weeks they would do this, and the kind of formula is this: is what routine things does your team always need to know to get a consistent performance? What are those things? So that might be a combination of sales, it might be technical knowledge, it might be whatever. For service businesses, I assume if you're own a service business, plumber, HVAC, whatever, you're a pretty skilled tradesman technician in your own right. You've been doing it for a number of years. You got your contractor or master's license, stuff. Highly recommend just doing technical training every single week, right? What do you make your technical training about? Create an agenda. Before the meeting, take 5 minutes and look back at the past week and say, what technical problems were my people calling me about this past week that they were interrupting me about? How do I do this? How do I do that? That's what you train on for the week. Create a running list, right? To cover it over and over and over. But then also doing some sort of sales training is important. And what do you do sales training in? Again, you just review the numbers. If your team is hitting the KPIs that you want to be hitting, sales training doesn't need to even be that long. Great, we're running. Whenever that dips, we're looking at the numbers and we're saying what's going on, then we're training in that thing. So I say all that to say I'm a big believer in it. If you guys are, like you said, if you're in a growth or scaling mindset, think about the companies that are already at maybe the position that you are wanting to get to, right? They're already at that level that you want to get to. And then you think about, what do those companies do day in, day out that maybe we thought we were better than, or didn't need to do, or didn't have time to, but they did, right? We want to mimic those things because there's a reason why they're doing those things. There's a reason why customers want to work with the big guys in town, even though we both know that their prices are higher, right, is because they expect more from their team. They train more, they invest more, they don't put up with as much, right? And so, yeah, look at your business, determine what are the reoccurring activities that allow me to get a consistent performance in the business. I know that's kind of like a big question, but there's a few core things typically associated with that, which are mostly like sales and operations, right? Sales and like technical work. And then just what's the time that I want to do this every week? And how do I want to prepare for it? I'd make it sure it's easy. The two ways that you can prepare for it is you can come up with like kind of training ahead of time. Wouldn't recommend that. I'd recommend just creating a simple training agenda before the meeting, looking back at your past week. How do you know that you can do this regularly? If you set a time in your calendar and tell the rest of your team, we're doing training every week at this time and everyone is expected to be there, you will be prepared for that meeting, like in some capacity, right? It's a self-accountability system. I really believe in that for like small business owners. And then you put it on the agenda. Hey, what happened at this week that needs to be addressed? Over time, you will get in a better rhythm of it. You'll get more forward thinking with it. But I think just scheduling it and doing it over the core activities of your business, you're going to have some weeks where it may be like, ho, ha, hum. Like, people are like, you're kind of like, well, I don't have a lot to say. And let's make sure we're doing this and this and that. That's okay. Just keep meeting, keep showing up. Keep on creating a culture of training and development. So anyway, really good question, Riley. I don't know if that helps you. We can get into more specifics, but would love to hear from anyone else if they do team training, if they've done team training, what's really worked for them.
Hey, what's up, I'm kind of in a similar position. I only have three guys. I was up to like 15 guys a couple summers ago, but I tore my ACL and kind of hindered the business. I had to take a break from these group calls. This is actually my first one back since then.
Great to have you back, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a win in itself, being back. Looking forward to kind of having a new take on it this time and being a little bit more involved. Really try to get what I can out of it. But yeah, one thing I've found is kind of something that I've done. I tell the guys that I can't really pay them for it, but if they have something wrong with their house or one of their family member has something wrong with their house, then we could like take a look at it. If it's within our wheelhouse, then we can do something about it. It's because it's kind of a motivator for
I know, Joe, you're breaking up, buddy.
To get something.
No, you're good. You're good now.
Having people work on their house. Having everyone, like, if there's something wrong with their house or their family member's house, then we'll go and work on it and have everyone there just to kind of take note or maybe have a hand in it, learn a thing or two.
Yeah, I think using kind of real world situations as training opportunities is huge. And also pictures and video can go a long way too. If you're not able to, necessarily, have this kind of like real world scenario, but not a customer kind of thing. Have your guys, if they run into a technical problem in the field, hey, why don't you just video this problem, take pictures of it, send it to me. There's your training for the next week. Right. I think for a lot of businesses, it's the communication is more important than the technical work, because it's not to say the technical work isn't important, but that's the harder skill to develop that most guys don't have developed. Just learning things like developing things like setting the right expectations, following through with the things that we say we're going to do. Even like how does, I dealt with one guy, he was a foreman that we like fired. After you heard this, you'll understand why. But he kept on like telling two different customers that he would like show up at the same time, two different places. And like he was afraid to say no, right? He was afraid to disappoint someone, which what would really happen is everyone would be so much more disappointed and upset because one person isn't happy, right? So every time he's in that situation. So I just asked him, why do you do that? Like, you don't need to do that. And we really worked with him. We developed him, and so anyway, all that to say is, Daniel Rodriguez, did you have something, buddy? Are you still on the call? I guess not. Okay, want to open it back up. Appreciate it, Riley. Great topic. It's one of those like kind of like who wants to talk about team training? But the important thing is just set it in your calendar, do it. Rogers Plumbing is another guy who sold his business down in Austin, Texas. Come hell or high water, man. He was doing two different kinds of trainings. 7:30 a.m. He would do it for 30 minutes on Wednesday and Thursday. So it was a technical training and sales training. He would do it with his team every single week. Notice that these two stories I tell the guys that like did training, both of them have a common outcome, which is they sold their business for millions, So you got to expect a higher standard from yourself to see it in your company and in your team. And you got to expect your team to live up to that standard. You do that through consistent training.
What other questions do we have today, guys? Thoughts, things you're trying to solve in the business?
I got, and this is Corey here. We've talked about this quite a bit on our coaching call. So my son and I, well, he's had the business for several years. We've gone into business together starting in January. So we're kind of looking at this year. General contracting business, residential construction, have really done a lot of different services over the past almost decade and trying to narrow it down. And for some of you that have maybe been through this or your companies have matured a little bit more, any suggestions or advice on, we kind of call this our discovery year. We're trying to narrow our business down to the right niche. The easiest thing right now that we're finding is he has a lot more experience with the exterior restoration type work. But still have done, interior remodeling and other facets as well. So anybody gone through that process before? Do you have any advice for maybe things that we need to avoid, or quite honestly, both of us get a little impatient, like we just want to narrow it down quickly. So yeah, any advice on that? Any thoughts?
Luke, what's up, buddy?
So I guess mine might be a little different than most people. We usually hear find a niche and run with it. Something we're seeing in Minnesota right now is we had a few years of big storms and then there's been nothing. And a lot of those exterior companies are really starting to hurt. We're able to weather it, especially these slow winters, because we offer remodeling and things like that. And we're seeing more and more a lot of these exterior only companies, including longtime companies, starting to diversify into remodeling or fire and water, things like that. So it does not hurt. I don't know where you're at, but and what your climate's like, but winter slows down for us here. And it's really nice to be able to have more than just like interior painting to keep us afloat in the winters.
Yeah, that makes sense. Appreciate that. I know we, in some of these cases, it requires different diversification of subcontractors. So all of our work is subcontractors. And so it's a matter of partnering with a number of enough subcontractors and making sure that we're feeding them and keeping the relationships alive. Because right now we're during storm season. I mean, we're going to be concentrating heavily on exterior. And then we may need some of those other subcontractors for interior work later on. So I don't know. I'm coming into this very raw. You know, I've got a business background, but I don't have a construction background. So I'm always curious about how to deal with those kind of not really adversity, but just variability.
Yeah. Riley, I see your hand up. Would love for you. I've actually talked to Corey about you specifically because you came to us not really sure exactly, you know, what you wanted to focus on. And so would love to kind of hear from you on how you got settled, you know, to bathroom remodeling.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So, I kind of like went into starting my business just saying, I'm going to be a general contractor. I'll do all of it. I'll do whatever anyone wants to do residentially, which obviously, you know, just casting such a wide net, you know, especially at first when it was myself, it's like I'm doing a little bit of electrical, a little bit of plumbing, a little bit of drywall, a little bit of tile, a little bit of framing, a little bit of this and that. And it just, number one, was just exhausting to keep up with it. And then it just made it really hard for me to like systemize my pricing and like really have like a good price catalog in order to price out my jobs, because it was just like, it was almost like every estimate I'm doing, I'm pricing something out that I either haven't priced before or maybe I've only done it once or twice. And then obviously that can be problematic if I'm underestimating things, which was happening. And so number one was I started using subcontractors a lot, but number two, I kind of just like sat down and like looked over my first year of what I was doing, and what jobs that I enjoyed doing the most. And for me, I think I have a bit of an artistic personality. So kitchens and bathrooms were always just the two big areas of remodeling that I just loved the outcome. It's always a super great, you know, before and after comparison for a bathroom versus, you know, you take pictures of some guy that just wanted a couple sheets of drywall and, you know, maybe a countertop in his basement, like not a whole lot of wow factor. So I kind of like sat back and looked at number one, what is a pain in the butt for me to keep bidding continuously? What am I losing money on doing because I don't have as much knowledge in it? And then number two, what do I love to do? Obviously, I love to do general contracting, but I hate doing drywall. I hate doing demo. I hate doing these eclectic jobs that people kind of pull out of, you know, thin air and want me to bid on. So I really kind of niched it down to originally bathrooms at first, but bathrooms and kitchens, there's so much like interchangeable work within them that I kind of niched down from bathrooms and then took another step up to like kitchens and bathrooms primarily. But really for me, it was like more so like, what am I most interested in doing? What do I know I can, you know, hit a home run on every time? And what do I not want to do? Honestly, that was a big thing, was like, I would find myself doing jobs and just being like, God, I hate this. And then one day I was like, yeah, I totally just don't have to do those jobs if I don't want to. So I don't know if that answers the question too much, but I think it was like just a lot of self-reflection. Like, what do I want to offer people? What do I want to be able to advertise to people? And what do I love doing? Because I know we're going to hit a home run every time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's good. I appreciate that. Good input.
Yeah.
Real quick, Corey, glad to hear you guys are like okay after that tornado yesterday. I live in the same town as Corey. And his son Caleb is in Wausau, Oklahoma. About 6:45 yesterday morning, and I'm like well versed with tornadoes, but this like tornado was like hit about a mile and a half from where I lived and did some damage. So it's storm season in Oklahoma for the exteriors, but glad you guys are good. Something, you know, we've talked quite about this, Corey, as well. Something that, and I think Riley, I think what has been said between Riley and Luke is like a lot of what needs to be said. It reflects some of the stuff that we've talked about, but I also think it's important to remember that I do like the moving quickly, because yes, let's move quickly, but worst case scenario happened. And let's say, like, what's the thing that would be worst case scenario? Well, let's say that we like picked a niche and it didn't work. It is so easy in your business to pivot from that and just pivot to a better direction to start finding better work again. Sure, it's like difficult in the short term, but I almost want to make sure that you're like giving yourself permission to say, hey, here's the direction that we're going in. They'll be well informed. But if it doesn't work, we know that we can pivot and figure things out. Because the fact is, that's exactly what will happen. And a lot of times, the only way to figure out that discovery is to start, somewhere. And so I don't mean to be vague in that feedback, as much as I'm trying to say that this isn't like the end all be all, and be careful about the amount of weight. I want to be thorough, want to be thoughtful, absolutely. But just be careful that the amount of weight that's being put on it isn't preventing action from being taken. Anthony, did you have something related to this? Anthony Sanfelice?
Yeah, I do. I actually have a question for Riley. I'm very much in a similar position. I've been operating essentially as an installation company since our inception. I'm a licensed GC and trying to get more GC work. Riley, my question for you is as far as this estimation process, you're going in, you're bidding kitchen specifically. I don't know if I'm not establishing credibility, but I'm not turning them. I'm not getting these contracts, even when I know my pricing is very fair. My question is like, what have you implemented in your sales process? Are you bringing samples? Are you designing the kitchen with software on site? How did you start getting kitchen business?
Great question.
For sure. Yeah. So the way I do my kind of customer journey is I have my initial consultation where I go and take my measurements, and then within 3 days they'll have their proposal appointment. So at that proposal appointment, I put together my own 3D model through with the software that I use. I use products as best that match within the software to what I'm able to source. But I quote everything at basically a middle line price, for tile, countertops, cabinets, essentially at the range where 90% of my other customers, land for their product selections. And then I use a company called ProSource. They're nationwide, but they have a phenomenal showroom. So I can source all my cabinetry, flooring, tile, countertops, really pretty much anything interior finish, you name it. So that's been a huge, phenomenal tool that I've been able to use because obviously I'm not the only contractor that does that, but the fact that I show up with a 3D model that I put together, it shows people that I've thought of every aspect of what's going to happen to their job, what it's going to look like, how we can change things, how we can meet their needs based on their consultation appointment. And then just being able to tell people, and if we were to move forward, right, we'll collect the deposit and then we'll go to ProSource and we'll pick out all of your products. And then we'll update your proposal too. And another thing, honestly, I've closed I think of all the kitchens I've closed, I've only closed one that was not under the cost plus method of pricing. So I've been doing cost plus consistently for the last 3 or 4 months, and just opening that level of transparency and telling people where their money is going to, how we're going to update their prices, how it's not necessarily a fixed price, but cost plus is great because there's skin in the game for both of us. But I've been turning more kitchens into signed contracts, I would say solely on cost plus, because kitchens are very expensive. Bathrooms and kitchens are square foot per dollar, your most expensive, areas in a home. So there's always sticker shock. And I think in any case, when you deliver a number to somebody that's higher than they're expecting or willing to pay or wanting to pay, cost plus really allows you to break that down to them and say, hey, I know this is expensive, but here's what it's going to cost me to produce the job. Here's what you're going to be paying me, or here's my contractor fee that we're going to be making over the course of your 68-week project, right? So a lot of times let's say my contractor fee is 12 grand, and I tell my customer, yeah, 12 grand sounds like a lot, but it's going to be an 8-week project. So, you divide that 12 grand by that 8 weeks and you're paying us, that math, whatever it is, $1,500, $1,800 a week. So that makes sense, right? So I think cost plus is huge. Obviously, Robert has preached that forever about it. But cost plus, really taking the leap into cost plus has really allowed me to secure more kitchens for sure. And then just having having somewhere like a Pro Source that's like an interior showroom that you can get all your finishes in one shot versus having to send people to 8 different vendors or
That's really good.
You'll figure it out. Sorry if I'm rambling, but that's
No,
my
no,
answer.
I didn't say that's really good as like, hey man, you're rambling. I said that's really good because that's a really good thing to say. With the Pro Source. So, and what I like about that
Quick
is,
question.
yeah.
Here's real quick. What software are you using?
For my modeling,
I was wondering that too. Yeah.
I use a software called Cedreo. It's CEDREO. It's an online design software. And it's pretty affordable. That's probably the 5th one that I've used, and I've been using this one the longest now. It certainly has its drawbacks, but until you really need to have some really advanced software and design skills to use most of the products that are a tier above what I'm using now. But it has served the purpose fully for what I need. I can basically build a whole home from my software, but I basically just draw out whatever the scope or the area of the scope of work is going to be. And it certainly takes a little bit to fiddle around with it and figure it out, but it's like $115 a month, and it's, in my opinion, I'd probably pay $250 for it for the the use that I get out of it. Being able to show somebody like the concept that you're coming up with makes your pitch so much more effective, and it also shows people, wow, this dude spent time to put this 3D model together in 3 days.
Preach.
So it's certainly not the only one, and like I said, I bounced around. I think it's like the 5th software that I've used in the last couple of years, but I like it, and it's it gives people what they want. So it's pretty cool.
Anthony, I've just put a link to that software in the chat, and I'm personally very interested in the software actually, because I wasn't aware of it until Riley, you just mentioned it, and it kind of, I feel like, bridges the gap that you just described, which is like we all want to do some sort of 3D modeling that does add a level of value. It does add kind of this level of setting you apart from other contractors in your sales process. It was also helpful for you internally when making plans and like executing them when you win the job. But it's like most of the design software has required this like hiring skill set and a big investment of time. And it sounds like you kind of it sounds like you had some experience with design software before, but it sounds like you kind of got in here on your own and just figured it out.
Yeah, for sure. Because I've used like SketchUp, and SketchUp is great, but it takes 3 times as long to put together a model. I've used some really dumbed down ones that are like $20 a month. And then I've also tried out Chief Architect, which essentially it seems like you need like an architecture degree to use. So Cedreo is great because it's like a very low entry, barrier to entry. Obviously with any software, you got to teach yourself and learn about it. Nicole, builder trend. But it's awesome.
Yeah.
And, the only downside to it is a UK based company or software. So
dude, the Brits.
I know. So you do have to like kind of figure out like just converting, like metric to imperial, and like they call a vanity a wash bin cabinet. It's just semantic stuff, but it is still very useful. And I can put and you can develop 3D renderings that look really legitimate. But it's a sweet software.
Do you see Chris's question, Riley? How much time does each? He asked, how much time does each 3D rendering take you to make in hours for each estimate?
It usually
how many hours?
45 minutes to an hour to get my floor plan and all of my like furnishings and finished products into a software, into a plan. And then once I build the floor plan, I use that to calculate, all of my material takeoffs. So that's also nice too, especially if it's like a flooring or tile heavy job. It calculates all your square footages for you. So you don't have to try to do all this crazy geometry math on a sketchbook and hope you're getting it right.
And one thing, Anthony, I want to kind of focus in on. This is a great conversation about this 3D modeling software. But Riley, it sounded like you were you've done like different kinds of 3D modeling software for a while, but it doesn't sound like that was the biggest differentiator that you found recently in closing more deals. Did I hear you right? Because I have found that the 3D modeling stuff is a really great benefit. It's a really nice to have. Customers love it. You will increase your closing rates by using that. But it almost sounded like earlier you mentioned that it was really how you explain kind of the numbers and the pricing and the estimate that made just as big of a difference. And we have found like in Power Builders, we don't do 3D modeling software, but what we do a really good job of is explaining how we work and how we charge in a really detailed way before we even create the proposal. And then we review the proposal with the customer so that they can see that in action. And part of the reason why I'm a believer in cost plus is because if you explain it right, you are able to confidently tell your customers, unless you find some guy with like a, chuck in a truck hourly rate that's like he's not a real legitimate contractor, you can have confidence with us that you're not going to ever pay more than you have to with this job. And then if you have the reputation and the trust to back it up, satisfied reviews, satisfied customers, referrals, whatever, that's a very strong sales process. So Anthony, I would look into I almost want to ask you, well, what are you doing on your sales process? But for sake of time, I would encourage you to look at simply, hey, how are you presenting the cost expectations? How are you presenting the expectations in terms of your process, in terms of your pricing, before you even give the customer the proposal? And then how is that proposal being delivered? Because there's something happening there. It sounds like if you're priced at the same level, I think you said, as a lot of your other competitive bids, there's probably something happening there that could be enhanced and tweaked a little bit in order to close more jobs. Real quick, Corey, I feel like we kind of jumped around. Do you have any more feedback, Corey, on the finding the niche stuff?
No, actually, it's pretty good. The feedback I got already is pretty valuable. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Experience goes a long way. So.
Yeah, I would encourage you, and I know we're meeting next week, so we can drill into this more next week. But creating a starting point is more important than trying to figure it out beforehand, right? There's this awesome book, I think I've mentioned it before, called The Lean Startup Method. And I recommend everyone here to check this book out, Lean Startup Method. And it's basically this, it's a book primarily written about software companies in Silicon Valley. And but basically the premise of the book is, listen, creating a complex, detailed business plans, creating, financial projections, creating all this beforehand. You want to have, wisdom. You want to be prepared. You want to know what direction you're going in and why you're going. Like, you want to have things a little bit figured out before you go into a direction. But spending too much time up front to gain absolute certainty will impede your progress, because even if you did all that stuff, the book talks about how you're going to likely pivot 50 times anyway to find your direction, which it recommends this method, which is really like, hey, what outcomes, defining the outcomes you want to get, acting, taking the action. So it's like, hey, here's what we want to do. Here's what we want to do it for. This is our goal. Here's the action we're going to take. You take the action, then you measure the results, and then you continuously refine the kind of process of discovery based upon the results from action taken. And so it's this like forever circular method. It's called the Lean Startup Method. That is highly recommend when figuring out any unknown variable in business, is how I recommend figuring this out. Not just a niche. So yes, it applies to niche, but any unknown variable in business. should I hire a project manager? I think I need a project manager. I've never hired a project manager. Okay, well, hire a project manager, measure the results, and then refine it based upon there. Maybe there's someone else to put him. Maybe you don't need him. Maybe you need to find someone else. But take action towards the thing you feel like you need to do, because it's taking that action that's going to give you all the data that allows you to make a better informed decision from there. So, yeah, I just wanted to use that as I think we've talked about that, Corey, but I just wanted to use that as an opportunity to kind of share that book and method with everybody. Okay, any last minute stuff? We've got a lot of people in the group chat. Love it. Appreciate you guys joining. Again, we'll send another email. And Bryce, I think before you got on, Bryce is joining us from our New York City office this morning. Bryce is in New York City. He's actually currently at an office of a project management software that I've started working with, Notify. Oh, there it is, man. Manhattan. Wow.
Yeah, I've got a
Living
view
that
of the
big city
Manhattan
life.
Bridge. Pretty sweet.
That's cool. And Bryce, we may send a text as well, just with the chat link, not with instructions.
Whole thing, right.
Travis, if you can get with Bryce on what to send in that text message, that'd be great. Okay, Barbara asked a question. It looks like Nicole answered it. Anything else before we close out today?
Luca, you had your hand raised maybe on this question if you want to chime in here.
Okay, my question would probably have continued the conversation for a little while longer, so maybe we can do it next week since we're getting to the end of the hour here.
Well, I'll tell you this. If you've got time, I've got a little bit of time. I don't know if Riley's got time, but I know that we can stay a little bit after too. And so let's come back to that, Luca, if you can sit tight for a second. Philip, what's up, dude?
Hey guys, was just wondering on that Cedrio software if it produced like 2D drawings that can be submitted for permit.
Yes, I use that as well for my 2D stuff. So, and you can develop, you can do, you do your layout first and you establish, your wall thicknesses, your wall heights, and you can lay all that out with your measurements. And then you can then, input all of like the building symbols for a vanity, toilet, bathroom, all of your electrical, all of your HVAC. And that's what I use to submit to the city for permits. And I have actually been told that they wish everybody did that because they have dudes coming in with, stuff written on a napkin for drawing for permit. So yeah, it works just as well. Certainly if you're doing something that's, requires architectural plans from an architect, like that wouldn't suffice. But for something like a remodel, it works, just fine. If you're building like an addition or a home, of course, you'd have to, get actual stamped plans from an architect. But in my I've pulled permits in 4 different counties with my plans from Cedrio, and I've had no kickback. The only time I had kickback was I forgot to label an outlet as GFCI, and that was it.
Can you brand? That's great. Can you brand it, like put it on a title block and put your, your logo and all that stuff on it?
I don't believe it. It basically just gives you, it generates a blueprint, that fits at like a 11 by, an 8 by 11 piece of paper, but you could always, import that into like Publisher or, Adobe and just, throw your logo on there. But it will say like your company name up at the top in the header.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's break down, and then Luca, let's hop back to you. Anyone else that wants to say, they can say. But for anyone that's new, we like ending our meetings with a little bit of juice, with some juice. So what I do is we count down from 3, 2, 1, and then we say growth on 3. Okay. All right. So counting down 3, 2, 1. Growth. Great to see everybody. All right, Luca, what's up, buddy? Let's hear it.
Yeah, so I was just giving some thought to that 3D rendering. Right now, the way that I do it is I have a cabinet supplier. And once I get the bid, or, they say that, the pricing's kind of in the ballpark of what they want to do, I'll call my cabinet designer and I'll have her come out, and she does the 3D design and does all of that stuff. So it just comes a little bit farther down the sales pipeline. I don't know if that's negatively affect my sales, obviously, because I've never done the 3D renderings within the first 3 days. I'm sure that would be a nice added asset, but it's also nice to outsource that 3D modeling to someone else and not have to do it in-house, because it saves me a significant amount of time. My question to you is, are you ordering all the cabinet parts yourself, ordering the trim pieces, the fillers, all of that, or are you still outsourcing that to someone else?
So again, I use ProSource. So when I do my consultation, I do my full sketch of the kitchen, for example, and then I send that to ProSource, and my designer gets to work on it right away. And they make a 3D rendering for me as well, but their rendering will just be of the kitchen space. So I still provide that to my customers, but it takes sometimes a week to get that back. And one of the things that we've really worked on dialing in is our return, turnaround, excuse me, geez, brain fart, our turnaround on proposals. So in a kitchen sense, knowing that I'm probably going to wait a week for the cabinet designer to get something back, I just do my 3D modeling as like kind of the introductory, proposed layout. I use most of my cabinets that I sell right now are a shaker style full overlay cabinet. So that style cabinet is in that software. So it works out because I'm able to put a cabinet in there that's pretty similar. But the 3D model is nice because then I have something on that, that return proposal appointment. I don't have to rely on somebody else to, get it done. So I've really just been doing it the way I have with like the 3-day proposal, just because I don't want to be the contractor that takes a week or two to get back to people. But when I order all my cabinetry, the bid that ProSource gives me includes all the crown molding, all the toe kicks, all the fillers, all of the quarter rounds. So based on the measurements, they'll order all of the necessary accessory pieces essentially for that.
And are they still going on site to measure, or are they just going off your plans?
So they fully go off of my measurements. So I give them the measurements, and then they develop the plan, and then they spit out basically an install packet that has all the elevation drawings, it has all of the layout, it has which cabinets go where. And then my project manager will go back, verify the measurements, make sure everything is correct. And then once all that's verified, we order the cabinets.
Not to get too far into the weeds here, but there's always a lot of back and forth once you get those first plans over to the client, in my experience, as far as different styles of cabinets they want, if they want this sort of drawer, that sort of drawer. Are you the go-between for all that conversation, or are they communicating directly with the designer?
So I schedule a meeting at ProSource with the designer and my customer. So in that meeting, once they've signed the contract, we move forward into like basically the pre-construction phase, where we go to ProSource and we will pick out what cabinet line they want. So what color they want, what drawer and door faces they want, if they want any add-ons like rollouts, a lazy Susan, storage within the cabinetry. So then we'll pick out all of those things, and then I get an updated number from ProSource, update that on the proposal because we do cost plus, and then collect the payment I need to pay for material to get things started. So I'm basically like the middleman, but I just am essentially walking my customers to my rep at ProSource.
Okay.
So I don't have to do any of that figuring out. And then basically that one appointment that I set to meet at ProSource is kind of like my backstop. Like, okay, these are the decisions. We're going to make all of these decisions today. After this, it would be a change order, if that makes sense. And that also alleviates like, oh, hey, I know we ordered the cabinets, but I was thinking about it, and now we want to put a fruit punch dispenser in the island. It's like, well, we already ordered everything, and that, we certainly can do that, but it would be a change order. So implementing that change order policy and being really, harping on that when you go over your working agreement and initial signing of the proposal. I really have not gotten a lot of that back and forth. I make it very explicitly known to my customers, like, hey, at this appointment, these are all of the decisions we're making, and after today, it's going to be a change order to, change your mind, of course.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Really appreciate that insight. Hey, Barbara, I think we have time for your question. It's good to meet you, by the way. I know you just recently joined our program. Good to have you.
Hello.
You said you still have a question on how to present the markup.
Right. So I tried to present the markup several times, pretty much within 3 months last year, I was trying to do that. And one of the projects that I'm talking about here, it was about $700,000 project, and my markup would be 140, even if I just did 20%. And they were the prices I was giving them were really good. For example, it was a full house remodel, so HVAC would have been 200,000 with some other company. So I chose the good one that was just 70. So my overall pricing was good, and I was saving them money. But as soon as they were very up and yeah, we're going with you. But as soon as they heard 140 for my work, they figured they can do it themselves.
So,
I don't know what they figured, but they didn't want to work with me. And there was like 3 projects in a row.
Yeah. So a lot of this, Barbara, has to do with how the sales process is managed from the beginning. It's something that we were kind of talking about earlier. In that first appointment, when you're doing your first kind of on-site walkthrough with the homeowner on the project or the customer in the project, you're gathering, all the necessary measurements. You're getting the customer's vision. You're kind of fine-tuning some of the finer details, and asking about material selections, kind of getting just a basic overview that allows you to create a proposal. And I have found that in that meeting, especially at the end, it's really important to circle up with the customer to go over these kinds of things, to go over things like, hey, I know a lot of contractors charge differently. Do you guys have a budget in mind? And do you guys have a kind of hope in terms of how you will be charged? The customer will probably maybe have a budget range that they'll give you. They probably won't have an idea of what, how it works in terms of how to create a proposal. So they probably be like, no, we were kind of hoping from you to hear from that. And that's when you'd want to explain to them, okay, here's how I charge. And you're just candid in that moment before you create the proposal in reviewing that with them. You're going to find with us that we're a big believer in cost plus. We talk about that a lot in our group call. And we're a big believer in it because it focuses more on the contractor making a margin than it focuses on just kind of putting an arbitrary markup on things. And that's not to say that all markups are arbitrary. That's just to say that it allows you to guarantee to make a profit while also building a lot of trust with the customer, because you're saying, to a certain degree, you pay what I pay, and then I charge this fee or these fees, and that's how I take care of my overhead, and that's how I make a profit. And I found that if customers still give pushback to that kind of setup, and if they're saying something like, I can do this myself, I'm kind of, in some situations, I'm like, be my guest. Like, you guys have full-time jobs, don't you? Okay, so you're going to take on another full-time job that you're totally unexperienced in and being your own general contractor. I wouldn't recommend actually saying that to a customer, by the way. But that's kind of the mentality that I have, is if someone says something like that, I want to make sure first that I've done a good enough job to present beforehand how our proposals work, how our estimates work, how we charge. And then if they're still saying, well, this is probably something I could do on my own, there might be an opportunity to clarify, hey, let's talk about that. Have you ever done a project like this? Do you have a full-time job? This will be a full-time job for somebody. That's the service I offer for you. And so maybe there's some room to kind of clarify and remove the delusions. But if they're still insistent in saying that, that wouldn't be a customer I'd want to work with anyway.
Well, they're not saying that to my face. They just, after I say my percentage, which is like I was saying 20%, then I don't hear from them anymore.
Yeah. I think we can dig into your sales process with Nicole. Has Nicole talked to you about the sales process yet?
We just had one meeting, so we didn't go into all the details.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but I know you're a quick study. I know you like to move quickly too, which we love. And so what I would do is in your next meeting with Nicole, or you can even schedule a laser call with myself or Nicole, but I'd bring this up in your meeting to say, hey, tell me about this sales process you guys keep talking about, because we already have a templated version of it that you can customize to your business. And you can read it to see how it works. So guys, I unfortunately do have to wrap up for today. But so appreciate everyone for staying a little bit longer. Barbara, it's great to meet you. Really great shares. Riley and Luke, I appreciate you staying after. Yeah, really appreciate that today. Great to see everyone else. Luke, Philip, Jim, Anthony, Ryan, Conrad, man, you're the man. We'll see you guys later.